Welcome into another edition of G-Rated, where we review the latest TV shows and movies. Today, I'm joined by Leah, Shawn, and Craig to talk about Season 2 of The Bear. Thank you guys so much for being here, chefs.
I think we actually forced this upon you more than
I don't remember you having a choice. I just want to state for the people out there, specifically Steve Peters, that this is not a show about an actual bear.
Okay. We had to qualify that. I'm glad that you guys brought it up, because it was actually a blind spot for me that I forgot to put it on our list of shows that we have to sign up for. And I felt immediately stupid for not having it, because it's honestly one of my favorite TV shows of the year so far. Season 1 was really good, but it felt like Season 2 just stepped it up to a whole new level. So I'm going to open it up to you guys. What did you like the most about this season? Because it feels like such a unique show, and it feels like they enhanced all the things that made Season 1 great. Go ahead.
I'll start. I first of all loved Season 1. Mm-hmm. It was every part of Season 1 was chaos, and then it ended, and you're like, oh, like what? I'm ready for the next thing. And Season 2 felt like the next thing. Like the fact each main person kind of got their own deep dive, and I think that was really important in this show that is so chaotic, to expand upon each character. And they were like building towards something the whole time. Like there was just so many different plot devices, and we'll get into, the Christmas episode, I'm sure. But I just think it really expanded upon Season 1 in the best possible way. And then it made you see the characters in a new light. I just loved it.
Yeah, I feel like the show does really well a lot of things that I normally hate in TV shows. Like, I'm normally not a fan when they get super far away from their main character and deep dive into supplementary characters, or like I normally wouldn't like an episode like the Christmas episode. Like, I don't like flashbacks and stuff like that. Like, I just like watching it. But they were terrific. Like, I liked it very, very much. And like I had talked about this a little bit with Craig, I think, after the first season, of like, where are they going to go? Like, what now that the bear, or the Chicago beef, or whatever it was called, the original beef, is dead, like what was going to be the next kind of thing for them. And it was just amazing. Like, I loved the deep dives. I loved the guest actors and actresses that they had.
Yes, lots of cameos.
It was unbelievable. The cameos in the season were unbelievable. So it was just a good, really good season of television.
I literally had a conversation with a good friend in which we decided we didn't want Season 2 of The Bear because we couldn't imagine how it could ever be this good. We thought they should just stop. First of all, Season 1 had that existential crisis, the death of his brother. And when you take that away, how do you replace it? I didn't know how they'd be able to replace it, but they did, and they added new elements. I thought they spun it forward. I love the use of music, and a lot of the music was from my time. And there were even Chicago bands like Smashing Pumpkins and Wilco incorporated into it, in addition to all the great Chicago scenery. But then I told you guys this off air. I read a review that said that everything about this show was great, except for the extraneous romance between Claire and Carmi. I was just like, what? That
questionable
relationship sizzles.
No chef.
Yes.
There's so much electricity, and the tight shots that they do on their face, that was a great addition to the show. Yes. I like Season 2 even more than Season 1.
I agree.
Me too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Molly Gordon was great as Claire in being this person that can bring some light and happiness back into Carmi's life. I think he says early in the season that, when at his old restaurant, when they retained 3 stars, not moved up in stars, but retained 3 Michelin stars, he bypassed joy entirely, and it was already on to the next thing, and the anxiety with that. Right. And she was his reprieve from that. And it presented an interesting dilemma, because how he's clearly someone that has a lot of things going on, a lot of familia trauma that he's inherited from his mother. And this is his chance at happiness. But by spending time with Claire, he's neglecting, what he's good at. Like it was interesting the way those two were juxtaposed against each other. And the question, like, do you do what you're good at and dive into it, even though it doesn't bring you any fulfillment, or do you give this thing a chance? And that's what made the final season. I love the twist of him. Like, this is their opening night, and their MVP is in. Yeah, he's trapped.
Yes.
In the freezer.
It was so good.
Yeah. Symbolically cooling the romance while he's stuck in the cooler, and then making that.
That was one of the most
at the end.
Anxious when he's still just because I think you were saying it earlier when he's in the freezer and he's talking, it's just shut up, dude. Just stop.
Yes.
Please stop talking. And I know obviously
It's not a black and white world. There's nuance.
Yeah,
right.
and it's tough because like I mean,
yeah,
you understand. Obviously, they go to great lengths to make sure you understand Carmy and like where he's coming from, but it's like I personally was rooting like the whole time. I'm kind of like, fuck this restaurant shit. Like go be happy, bro.
Right.
Like it made me happy to see him happy.
Right.
And so, but I mean, that's what this show does so well. It makes you really invested in the characters and like all of them. Like I mean, the Richie episode or just like Richie's transition is one of the my favorite like character developments. Whoa, coffee. One of my favorite character developments I've ever seen in a TV
bad
show.
Coffee too. I'm just saying.
Oh my gosh.
Hands. But yeah, no, I feel like Richie's the two standalone episodes. Let's talk about those because, and we'll talk about the Christmas one too because that was just.
One of the
I
best
love
TV ever.
episodes that deal in chaos and anxiety like that, and that was an all timer. But the two standalone episodes, it felt like you said, sometimes they don't work when you delve away from the main characters. But in exploring Marcus and his thing, and then exploring Richie and that transformation, like my one qualm is that, okay, maybe 1 week at this fancy restaurant is not going to totally radically change somebody, but the way that it was done was so well orchestrated. I couldn't really get upset about it.
Did really you could tell that Richie was always trying to help and be a good person, and like he just didn't know how to. And he was finally presented with like an outlet for his desire to help people. And I love Richie so much. Like he's so problematic that you want to root for him almost.
And he was so immersed in this fine-tuned machine, right? Yeah. That you almost have to accept that you're thrown into this and you're the only guy who's not buying in. I could see that happening in a week. The scene for me that was just sublime television was the final the final scene with Olivia Colman where they're just peeling mushrooms. That was just terrific to me. That may be my favorite scene of the entire. Well, one of two because I'm going to go off on the other one in a minute here.
The cameos, man.
The Olivia Colman scene was incredible television to me.
It was. I loved that, and I loved the conversation that kind of starts to shift the way that he views things in terms of like respect everyone that works here, respect yourself. And he was like, I can do respect. And that was something that it felt like in season 1 he never got any of because of the he could be a heel sometimes. So I love that. But what was your other scene, Craig? Because I know well there were a handful of really
Chicago.
good ones.
It's very Chicago. This is a very Chicago show.
But
and
baseball too.
I curated a handful of scenes because my dad hasn't been watching the show. I curated a handful of scenes and we watched them together and he loved it. And the Richie hot dog scene, of course. But when Oliver Platt is talking to Carmy, basically saying, I need you to buy in. He's the one that leads him down that path too. And I'm pissed off at Oliver Platt for that. You get it. He's got a major investment, but don't tell the kid he can't have any happiness in his life because of it.
It was funny because he was like, there's nothing you could have told me that made me happier. And then he's like, but also, oh no.
Exactly. But when he tells the story of the Cubs in the series, in the NLCS against the Marlins, when they are that close, and the narrative, of course, how everybody remembers it. It was Bartman. It was Moises Alou. No, it was Alex Gonzalez bobbling a routine double play ball that would have gotten them out of the inning just fine. By the way, Alex Gonzalez had the highest fielding percentage in the NL this year. I wanted to verify that. I told you that, and I checked. That was it. That was how it all unraveled. I was literally out of my seat screaming at the television. Exactly. That's it. Nobody remembers that, but that's why the Cubs unraveled that year.
It's a very distinctly Chicago show.
Yes.
Like it does a great job with the cinematography of making it feel like a Chicago show.
But without it being like exclusionary, we're like, I've never been to Chicago and I love it. Like I still like I feel like I understand Chicago to a little bit, which obviously it's still a TV show, but it's just everything about the show is so well done. And also just like I love close-up shots of food. Yes. Like it's awesome. I like it's artistic and it's beautiful and I like food. And that part of the show was really cool for me too.
And close-up shots on faces.
Yes.
Yes.
The shot cool. of Carmy and Claire when they met in the convenience store, and they were just you could see them falling in love, and I was just like, God damn it, I want to be. I fell in love in that moment. Right. I was just like, that's what this is like.
That's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like.
I
was
ever
looking
find
into
myself in a
Claire's
shot like
eyes,
this,
and I was just like,
no, you're so right though.
Yep.
That scene was amazing.
it was unreal.
To call that. I don't want to go back to that review.
Extraneous.
Extraneous. How do you call that scene extraneous?
Right.
What?
That's a weird one for me. And I felt like, to your point, like season 1 was really good, and the whole thing about the brother, it felt like a lot of the flashbacks with the brother always painted him in a very happy and uplifting light. When there were some really, he was dealing with some very inner demons, obviously. This season, I felt like for all the uplifting moments, there were also, just like life, there were the moments of stress and pure anxiety that kind of got people addicted to the show in the first place.
Yeah.
Like we talked about Carm in the freezer, but the conversation with Claire that she overheard was obviously a tragic twist at the end. But the conversation with Richie was just as devastating, because Richie actually underwent this transformation, and yet because Carmy is still in this place where he's having to choose between happiness and health and what he's doing with his job, it dragged their relationship right back to where it had been in the past. And that whole camera shot of them on either side of the door was just phenomenal. But what was your most stressful moment of the season? Because it had quite a few.
Boy.
I mean, do we even have to talk? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mine.
Exhausted.
So when they're sitting at the table in the Christmas episode, and he was throwing forks at Bob Odenkirk.
Oh my
Dude.
And they're like, "Are you gonna throw the fork?" And they're all like, "Stop it, stop it!" And I was just like, "Don't throw!" Like I was like, "Don't throw the fork!" Like that. There was so much tension, and then when Donna finally comes in, you're like, all right, like they can just enjoy dinner. And then like, oh my
We
God.
haven't even talked about
She was the source of all the tension in that damn house.
Yeah.
It was nuts.
And wow, what a performance by Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yes.
Dude, that's what I was gonna say. For me, not even the I guess not most stressful, but the most impactful moment of the entire show. And I talked about this to you the other day, was when she shows up at the opening. And Peter is the one that has to deal with all of that. Like, they treat this guy like a joke throughout the entire show. And he has to deal with probably the most. And, like, not to get too deep, I've had, like, I don't have a good relationship with my father. So, like, on a very personal level, like, you see that and you see Peter. Like, I know what that weight feels like. And they put that on a character that's been largely irrelevant for most of the show. And when he is around, they treat him like shit. And he has to deal with something like that. Like, that moment left me, like, it destroyed me.
And he deals with it with such kindness too,
Yes,
right?
right.
Like,
He's such a good person.
Well, that was the thing that after that scene, I was like, it's so funny because you kind of like laugh at Pete too, along with everybody.
Part
like
of the family.
the whole show, you're like, oh, Pete,
This
like
guy's
he's
a
such a loser, blah, blah, blah. And then when you got him in that isolated moment, you're like, no, he's actually like an amazing, nice,
the
like,
only
normal,
good person in the family.
And everybody else is a disaster. He's actually normal, and it's funny. Like, you have to step back and think, oh my God, like they completely clouded my view of him when he's actually like an amazing
They made you
person.
feel bad.
Yeah.
Right. When he's reassuring her that it's okay, that she's not going to go in there, and then he goes back in there in tears to his wife. I don't cry in movies or TV shows, but I was very much tearing up because I was like, holy shit, they just took this ancillary off to the side character that we'd clowned on the entire time and just made that entire thing. And Jamie Lee Curtis, like you said, if she doesn't win a guest star Emmy for this, I don't know who's going to win it. But that Christmas episode was unbelievable. Like the cameos, I feel like cameo is not even the right word for it, because it felt like they were a part of that universe. Like they had been with the cast the whole time. Like Odenkirk's phenomenal. Dude. Jamie Lee Curtis, John Bernthal was fantastic.
John
Mulaney was amazing.
Sarah Paulson.
But like,
that's
Sarah
so
Paulson,
good.
that's right.
No, and the whole thing was so good. And you were talking about like Carmi's brother and like how they're always showing him happy, but like the scene of them standing inside the closet or whatever, where they're talking, and then he walks away and he just breaks down, and I was
that hurt me.
It hurts because you know what's coming too, right? Like you know how this all ends, and like it just is devastating because the show is so real. Like there's so many moments in the show where I'm like, that is just like very like, and not this is completely related, but when Richie and what's the other guy? The guy that fixes everything. Fact. When they come in and they're freaking out about how Claire has lost weight and stuff like that, and she's hot now, and I'm like, that is like a real, like dudes do that shit. Like that is a real, super real moment that you're not going to see in a lot of shows. And like, there's so much of that stuff where I'm like, that is just like, I forgot that I'm watching TV. That just looks like two like real world people interacting.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to get that across on TV shows, I feel like, and it feel real. And they did that so well, so often. And I feel like the Christmas episode was a lot of that, where I was just like, oh, it almost made you uncomfortable because I was like, it was so
I had
real.
to pause so many times.
Yes, because you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, because it reminded me a lot of the end of Glass Onion, where they have the shot of just where it's constantly going back and forth between the things slamming over the Mona Lisa and stuff like that. And you're like, something's happening. Something's gonna happen. You feel yourself like tightening up, and then obviously it eventually does. And boy, did it!
I was watching that episode at night, and my fiance was sleeping next to me, and she woke up a few times because I would like audibly gasp when Jamie Lee Curtis drove through the fucking house. Oh my god, this is nuts. But to your point, it does feel like this is the rare type of show that knows its characters, knows how to frame them, and knows what drives them, what they're afraid of, what their trauma is. And they did an amazing job on building on that by showing you their family in that episode, and just these very real fears and inherent anxieties and stresses that are passed down to them. It's very rare that a show is able to effectively convey that. Do you have any complaints, concerns, qualms with the season at all? Because I normally have like one or two, and I struggled. I think the season started maybe a little bit slower, but it's a very minor quibble, and that's really all I've got.
I wish it was longer.
Yeah,
I mean, the only thing I will say is like the characters were good, but like just sometimes there's moments where you're watching the show and you're like, oh, that's John Mulaney.
Right.
And like, oh, that's Jamie Lee Curtis. And it kind of takes you out of it for a minute. But the performances are so good that you get thrown right back into everything so fast that you kind of forget about it. But like specifically in the Christmas scene, there were moments where I was sitting there being like, these are all really big actors. Like there's a lot of star power in this scene. Other than that, though, I can't. And that's not even a real complaint. Right. Other than that, I don't have much.
I mean, I think there's room for development with some of the other characters, the way they did. I mean, we got the karaoke scene, which was incredible as well. But I think they could do that with the other characters as well. I'd like to see it. That's not a complaint. It's just maybe some material for season 3.
Right.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the Marcus episode, by the way?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was very uplifting, and of course, at the very end, they have to bring you back down to earth with Marcus's storyline in terms of missing the call from his mother's nurse.
Yeah,
But that whole process that he goes through in learning how to be such a professional, I mean, it was uplifting, and at times in season 1, it felt like it was short on that, at least compared to season 2. And I liked that they took time with him and with Richie to kind of flesh them out more. And to your point, I feel like maybe season 3, they could do that a little bit more with Tina and Ibra, because it felt like Ibra was just kind of, he had a storyline, but it was very brief and not really touched. It was left hanging for several episodes.
Yeah, with their dad. And
I love Tina as a character.
Yeah, Tina's a great character.
They're all good characters, man.
Marcus, too. Like, he's such an open person anyway.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when you travel, when you leave the country, just how your perspective can shift, and he was wide open to all that and absorbed it and incorporated it.
The other thing I like too, and what I mentioned like when we first started this, was I feel like there were moments for taking a breath in season 2 that weren't necessarily there in season 1. And what I liked about Marcus's journey in Copenhagen with Will Poulter's character,
it was great. He was good.
I was like on the edge of my seat where I was like, oh my god, he's gonna like lose it on Marcus, but he was like so kind and patient with him, and I was like, it's so refreshing to see a chef portrayed not in an abusive light. And I guess you could say the same thing about Olivia Colman's chef character too, but it was just like the whole time I was like, oh god, he's gonna like go through the ringer, but it's like he didn't need to. He just needed to have like a really nice experience learning from other people, and I loved that. Like it was just a nice reprieve from the chaos and the
there is
bullying.
No cat, right? Yeah, there's no cat, is there?
Yeah,
the cat is not real.
Right?
We established that.
I like that Carmi was like, and I fed an invisible cat too. I was like, oh, this is a thing.
Yeah. And it makes it that much more hard to watch when they revert back to the chaos that was the original.
That's what I was
beef.
just going to say. Yeah.
Because like Richie has learned how to be a part of this professional environment. Like, I wear suits now. Like, he is that guy, and he totally nails it in the finale when they need someone to step up.
But I love that he's also still Richie.
Like, he was like, fuck yes. Oops.
It's genuine, and people like that. I mean, the whole show is genuine, and people relate to that. I like it.
And Marcus, like, his whole thing with Sydney, and that's why it's
saying.
devastating because Carmy sends these people to very specific places for very specific reasons. He sees the overarching end goal, but he reverts back to the same things that the toxic traits that he had in his kitchen at the worst times, and it brings out the stress and anxiety for Sydney, who like we haven't even really talked about, but she was phenomenal this season too. Like this cast is just incredible.
And you even like, because we talked about earlier, like you just want to say to Carmy, like just go run away, be with her. But like you also feel for Sydney because she was kind of like doing so much of it on her own, and you were just like, Carmy, like just go help her, you know? And you're almost like mad at him because you see all the stuff she's going through. You learn a little bit more about her backstory with her mother and her relationship with her father. And I just feel like you get to know her so much better. And when she's kind of going through the struggle, you're like, you just want to shake Carmy and be like, you need to help Sydney. Like, I want you to be happy, but like, I want Sydney to be happy too.
And she's getting all this advice, or like basically being like, make sure he doesn't screw you over.
Yeah, like, make
and
sure
you want
you
to sit
trust
there,
each other.
right? You're like, you can trust Carmen. Like, you can trust Carmen, but
no, you can't.
Can you trust Carmen? Can you trust Carmen? Like, because this show's not predictable by any means.
No.
If Carmen went and just fucked everyone over, it would suck. I would be pissed, but I would be like, I'm not going to be any more surprised at anything else that happens in the show.
Yeah. I love their dynamic, which is one that we haven't really talked about, but the scene of them like fixing the table or whatever, the way that was shot was incredible. And you know, their little thing.
Yes.
Like, I want to start using that on the daily with people that are
we
close
should do
to
that
me,
like on our like show.
Yes.
Like when someone gets mad.
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
Any final thoughts before we give out our scores for the season?
We just talked about, you know, how they managed to maintain tension. There's all sorts of little elements they do. Obviously the 8 weeks still open, 2 weeks still open. They keep doing it, but the use of clocks.
Yes.
There's always clocks visible. You're always aware of the passing of time, and it's getting closer and closer. Little elements like that just add to the tension as well.
The chaotic Post-it notes and
scribbles
and
but also
like crazy
the
people.
other thing I want to mention is the every second count sign, because the first time like you see it is in the bakery in Copenhagen, then you see it again at the kitchen that Richie goes to, and then obviously Marcus gets the delivery at the very end and puts it up, and it's like the tie between all those things. I just thought that was like a really nice touch.
I think the big thing for me is like we were talking about, like Craig was saying, after you lose kind of, or after the first season, you wonder what like the big existential crisis is going to be for the second season. But like at this point, and I by no means do I want them to like beat this horse until it like beat a dead horse, but like the Jamie Lee Curtis, like that's a whole other new thing of tension that could be a whole season in itself. And like you only got one night of the restaurant really. Like there's still so much for the show to explore. And also like everyone is either in a family or knows people in a family like this where just something is always going wrong. Like it is going to be chaos and there's always going to be something, which I'm very excited for. I like that the show is short episodes, but I wish it wasn't also. I want more of it.
This feels like the type of show that's going to know when to get in and get out. It feels like a Succession or a Barry that like, okay, maybe it's only going to be 4 seasons, but they're going to be like all-time great seasons of television. I'm okay with that. Final score out of 10 for season 2.
What do you got?
You start.
I have to start.
You're on the end.
I can't give something a perfect score, so I'll go 9.5.
Okay, there we go.
I'll give it a perfect score. I'll give it a 10. I love that. Was one of the best seasons of television I've watched.
It was great.
In a very long time.
My favorite.
And
show.
one of the best. The Christmas episode is one of the best, if not the best, episodes of TV I've ever watched.
I'm with Craig because nothing's ever perfect, but I'll go 9.5, which is the highest G-rated score I've ever given.
It was
all right.
Yeah,
there we go.
It was perfect.
Loved it.
I'm on the same page as a 9.5. I have given out a 10 in the past, but I feel like I said, for me, it started a little bit slower, but I mean, it was pretty close to perfect for me. But I think that's going to do it for this edition of G-Rated. You can follow Craig at Craig S. Morgan. You can follow Shawn at Shawn_DePaz. And you can follow Leah at Leah Merrill. You can also follow me at Gerald Bourget. Until next time, keep it G-Rated.